Greetings, scholars, and welcome to the finale. I always give this lecture to my face-to-face students in any writing class, which means if you have me for lots of things, you get to hear me rock on my rocking chair on the porch, giving you life lessons. 3 times, maybe? 5 times? I hope not 5 times. It's a little bit different every time, except for this time when it'll be recorded. I just want to kind of nail home that toolkit, those skills that I'm trying to build in you over the course of this writing course. Not trying to give you a fish, I'm trying to teach you how to fish. This is sort of a great end cap to the labor-based grading explained and how I'm giving you all the power but all the responsibility. So here we are talking about what you can do now that this may be the last writing course you ever take. How do you go on and improve your writing skills? We got a taste of that this semester where you're getting that ambient learning, ambient revision ideas. You're reading other work. Not only are you reading it for content, but you're reading it for style, word choice, organization. You can start to see what good writing looks like. You can start to rhetorically analyze stuff that you're reading and you're like, this was published, and critique it and learn from it and make yours better or make yours something that you prefer. You're developing your own voice, which is why I don't give you a whole lot of rules to what writing means and what writing is, because your own style is developing. Your academic style and your personal style and your professional email style. Those can all have your voice distinctly while still adhering to those genre expectations and constraints. So what I'm here for today is like, go forth, fish more. I guess my big soapbox today is write. Write as often as you can in as many different genres as you can, and read more than you write. So we're going to go through a few wacky genres that we didn't cover in this class, and you may have not covered in any class, but they are just examples of good writing, and you can learn from them for whatever genre you end up having to write in. If you're doing daily reports at work, you're going to be learning from this Shakespeare sonnet and this Porter Shreve obituary and Walden Pond that I'm going to read you today. So let's just take an adventure on how you can always be critically aware, critically analyzing, reading as much as you can in as many genres as you can, and learning from it and honing your own genuine writing voice. All right, so I'm going to start with Henry David Thoreau. We don't do a whole lot of poetry and, literature with a capital L in any of my classes because I think they're either overdone or we have to spend so much time talking about them that we don't talk about the things that you're actually going to be encountering in your modern real life. That does not mean that the classics don't teach you something and aren't great. So let's just start with, I'm sure somewhere I've told you, write in short sentences, be as clear as possible, use short words when possible, use short sentences while possible, get to the point. Start cutting adverbs, start cleaning things down, making it lean, slim, sleek, direct. And now I'm going to read you from Henry David Thoreau's Walden. These are the opening lines. I think we got, 3 sentences here? When I wrote the following pages, or rather the bulk of them, I lived alone, in the woods, a mile from any neighbor, in a house which I had built myself on the shore of Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts, and learned my living by the labor of my hands only. That was the first sentence, and it's 85-90% of this entire piece I've got for you. I lived there 2 years and 2 months. At present, I am a sojourner in civilized life again. All right, so this is all of the best ideas and concepts that are going to come out of this book. You read the rest, and it's just going to take you on the journey to reinforce why he feels this way. All right, so good writing is short sentences. And then I read you the longest sentence ever. Not ever, but probably close. The longest good sentence ever. Because we are looking at, can you tell which one does he prefer? Walden Pond, living in a cabin that he built with his own two hands, living by the labor of his hands alone, or civilized life? So, as we read this one, that first sentence again, when I wrote the following pages, or rather the bulk of them, I lived alone in the woods, a mile from any neighbor, in a house which I had built myself. Do you see how we're sort of, we're on a long walking journey with him. It just keeps going, You've got all of these commas separating ideas, but they all just kind of are leading us on this journey into his wandering wilderness on Walden Pond. He got away from civilized life. He got away from societal constraints. And he got away from writing expectations. So we've got this long wandering sentence that's beautiful and it's illustrative of his life on Walden Pond. It makes you feel like you're walking through the woods with him. And then we get back and I lived there 2 years and 2 months. That's a sentence. Statement, it's fact, it's clean, it's direct. At present, I'm a sojourner in civilized life again. So he's back. This is all a memory. Grab that word sojourner. If that's not a familiar word to you, that is like a temporary travel. So you live in life, you might go visit a conference or something, but if you do like a study abroad for a month or something, that's a sojourn. That is this temporary existence somewhere. And he uses the word sojourner for civilized life. So you already know that he felt more at home and more real on Walden Pond. That was 2 years of his adult life. So let's say 30 years of normal civilized life and 2 years of the Walden Pond adventure. You can feel the Walden Pond adventure in that opening sentence. It is long, it's a journey, it meanders, it gives you information, but at this walking pace. And now you're also getting these clipped final sentences that inform you that he's back and he feels like a stranger. So, I give you the rules. I didn't give you very many rules about writing because there are rules, but then they have their uses and then they have their uses when they're broken. So to me, instead of giving you a list of rules and then telling you to go out and break them so long as you know what you're doing, I think instead develop, what are you trying to express? What are you trying to express to your audience? What are the feelings that you have and how much of that ambient information about how you feel, what it means, what we're going to be doing in the rest of this book, can you put into how you style those sentences? When he talks about Walden Pond, we have these long run-on, but artistically precise sentences that are like wandering in the woods. When we're talking about civilized life and cities and normal time, they are short, concise, proper sentences. What you would be considered good writing in a classroom. Because he's back in the place where people judge stuff based on classrooms. Whereas at Walden Pond, there was no one to judge. The squirrels don't mind his run-on sentences. So you're getting those two moods and his attitudes towards them without him having to say it. He didn't tell us, he showed us. So I think this is a great example of just wonderful writing that doesn't break the rules, doesn't ignore the rules, but knows exactly what the rules are and then chooses to manipulate what that means to kind of give that rhetorical implicit understanding. So beautiful writing. You can be like, that is a really long sentence, but it does something. And then the other ones are very different. You kind of jump up. So recognize how you show us something And you can be telling us how you feel about it, what your opinions are, which side of the argument you fall on, just based on how you're presenting that information. Thoreau, one of the masters. Shakespeare, I know, one of the masters. Let's do 4 minutes of Shakespeare. You'll be healthier because of it. Shakespeare, you're probably not going to want to read one of the histories or one of the romance plays by yourself for funsies over a summer. But you could read sonnets. Shakespeare's sonnets, you can get Penguin paperbacks for less than $5. Keep one in the bathroom. They're 14 lines. They take 45 seconds to read. So, and every time you sit down and decide to take a break, you could be a little bit more cultured, a little bit more well-read. I think you should read twice as much as you write. You should probably write twice as much as you already do. So let's just find ways that we can sneak that into your regular life. All right, so a couple of terms we need to know before we look at this piece. A blazon. A blazon was a very popular genre of poem that describes a woman's beauty with all these similes and metaphors about other beautiful things. I don't know, Princess Bride with his eyes were like the sea after the storm. That's blazon language. It's very cliched in our modern ear, but it was starting to get cliched in Shakespeare's time. He was so sick of hearing about, lips as red as roses and skin as white as snow and blah, blah, blah. It started to get old and it started to seem hackneyed and cliched. So Shakespeare decided, I'm going to write the ultimate blazon to end all blazons by basically making fun of the entire genre. A sonnet. The structure of a sonnet is it's 14 lines. You've got 3 quatrains, and quatrain, quarter, it's 4 lines. And they have a rhyming pattern of A, B, A, B. First line, third line, they rhyme. Second line, fourth line, they rhyme. And then the second quatrain has its own C, D, C, D rhyming scheme. And then the third quatrain. And then you've got this final couplet. So you've got 4, 8, 12, and then this final couplet of GG. They both rhyme. A turn is then the punchline, basically. You're listening to one of those long-winded narrative jokes. I don't know, my Uncle Mickey used to tell them, and they would take 15 minutes, and then there'd be a punchline. It was 15 minutes of your life you'll never get back. But the more you sort of bought into it while sort of suspending that, waiting for the punchline. So you're absorbing information and it keeps sort of battering on about something, and then there'll be just some total dad joke pun or something at the end. I think we understand it from jokes easiest, that you're hearing this setup, it's a joke, so you're like, okay, but you're waiting for that punchline because that's the thing that makes it funny. A turn is not funny per se, but it's this thing that sort of twists your understanding of the previous 3 quatrains. So you're building this idea in lines 1 through 12, and then you're sprinkling a new spin on it in 13, 14. So let's look at my favorite sonnet from Shakespeare. By the way, if you're going to be looking these up on the interwebs or flipping through them in your book, Shakespeare's sonnets are usually named after the first line. So this one is called My Mistress's Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. Does this sound like a blazon to you? If you were sitting down and being like, read me something beautiful, darling. This is starting to sound a little bit insulting, right? He's basically saying yeah, no, she doesn't sparkle like a diamond. Lips are not red like red roses. They're just, lip colored. I think romance novels have wildly taken the blazons like milky white breasts as white as snow. And he's like, nah, they're like tanned leather. I don't know what to tell you. Her hair's like black wires. He's getting kind of insulting. This is like 30 seconds from a martini being thrown in your face. So it's obviously satire. He's doing something here. He's making fun. Is he making fun of the woman, or is he making fun of the genre of Blazon poetry? Let's find out. I've seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses I see in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. This is starting to sound like an insult of the woman, not just a satire on the poetry. To say something like, her breath reeks, we're getting a little bit more intense on the word choices and how we are dealing with the topic. So we've got this satire. We get there with an increasing insult level. Now let's read the third quatrain to see where this is going. Hold your martini tight. Don't throw it in his face yet. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music have a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. Okay, so he's not saying like she's gross, but she's the best I could do. He's telling you that he loves to hear her speak, but like it ain't a symphony. That whole like she floated through the room like an ethereal goddess. Like, no, she walked on her feet in shoes. It made noise, and she, gravity does apply to her, just like all other Newtonian physics. So I'm starting to see the build-up for the punchline. So, and yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. So, he is twisting it to say, I see exactly what she is. She is not some romanticized idea of a goddess with snow white skin, and her voice is like a symphony of violins, and her cheeks are like roses, and none of that crap. He sees her for exactly who she is, and that is precisely what he loves. That is a huge twist. So he's basically made crap out of the entire genre of Blazons, giving you this satire of Blazon where you're insulting the woman with how she is not any of these metaphors. And then that build up to, but I see exactly who she is, and that's exactly who I love. And so he's created this no viable alternative argument conclusion where he's like, do you want to hear somebody just like blowing smoke about how you're a magical pixie brought down from the moon? Or do you want somebody to love you for who you are? Which means that if you listen carefully and buy this and don't throw the martini in his face, you recognize that this is really a true love from somebody who really sees that woman. And anytime anyone would want to say, your eyes are like the sea after a storm, you'd be like, shut up, get out of here. It's kind of ruined Blazons because he's making fun of how disingenuous they are, how they are false compare. And I think that this is genius writing. It kind of builds up that sort of insult and then makes it the most sincere love poem of all of them. Oh, Shakespeare. I know. He seems like he's overhyped. Then sometimes you're like, no, he's actually pretty great. All right. A genre that I'm pretty sure you probably have never studied. And this is part of my platform that you need to read promiscuously. I'm going to get there again at the end, but read as many different things as you can read. I had a roommate in college who was a political science international relations major. I was an archaeology major, very like past and present. But she had subscriptions to The Economist and Marie Claire. So we read like a makeup magazine every other week, and we read The Economist, which is an anonymous publication. So again, when we talk about journals and critical analysis, and if it's an anonymous publication, you start to be like, oh, is that legit? Sometimes, yes. The Economist has some of the greatest writers and journalists of that era writing for them, but they make a blanket anonymity for their writers. This piece was in The Economist about 10 years ago. We know that Porter Shreve wrote it because he mentioned it in his biography, The Obituary Writer. Porter Shreve is one of the most famous obituary writers for famous people. And like, what a weird niche writing genre to be a specialist in. But he did it very well. And I will try to get through this without choking up, but I'm very Scotch-Irish. And I've always had a hard time getting through this in a face-to-face lecture. Now I'm being recorded, so I can wince at it from now until eternity. I wrote my own father's obituary 6 months ago, and I did a much more sort of standard obituary, as you would expect, with the, like, born on blah, blah, blah. But that's not what Porter Shreve would write. I still tried to take lessons from this, however, when I had to write in this genre for the first time. So let's look at what he does. Bill Millen. I imagine you've probably never heard of this man. I had never heard of him either until I read his obituary. And then you'd come away with it going, God, I wish I met that guy. All right, so it begins with, any reasonable observer might have thought Bill Millen was unarmed as he jumped off the landing ramp at Sword Beach in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Unlike his colleagues, the pale 21-year-old held no rifle in his hands. Of course, in full Highland rig, as he was, he had his trusty skein-dhu, his little dirk, tucked in his right sock. But that was soon under 3 feet of water as he waded ashore, a weary soldier still smelling of his own vomit from a night in a close boat on a choppy sea, and whose kilt in the freezing water was floating prettily around him like a ballerina's skirt. But Mr. Millen was not unarmed, far from it. He held his pipes high over his head, at first to keep them from the wet, for while whiskey is said to be good for the bag, salt water wasn't, then cradled in his arms to play, and bagpipes, by long tradition, counted as instruments of war. All right, so you're used to an obituary starting with, like, Bill Millen was born in 1928 on the... Instead of starting at the beginning, he starts at sort of this immersion in the most interesting day in the man's life, probably. So think about that when you're doing your writing. You know the arc of the story, but you know it's important. Your reader maybe doesn't yet. So starting with, like, tell me about your summer. Doesn't start with, like, well, on the first day of summer vacation, I woke up in the morning and I made myself some Cheerios and we were low on milk, so they were kind of dry. Like, did you do anything on your vacation over the summer? Can you please skip to something interesting? We can get back to the Cheerios once I'm, like, invested. But for now, like, please don't just give me a play-by-play of every morning's breakfast all summer long. So think about that. When you're trying to tell a story, you haven't sort of hooked your reader to believe it's important like you think it's important. So where could you start? The beginning is usually the worst place because we haven't gotten started yet. So dumping us in right at this moment, you know that he was on the beach of Normandy on D-Day. And he was not carrying a rifle, he was carrying bagpipes. And we've got these great images that his kilt was floating in the water like ballerina skirts. And, the smell of vomit. We're engaging all of the senses. So let's move on a little bit more to just get some character development. Give us a tune, Piper. Mr. Millen thought him a mad bastard. The man beside him, on the point of jumping off, had taken a bullet in the face and gone under. But there was Lovett, strolling through fire quite calmly in his aristocratic way, allegedly wearing a monogrammed white pullover under his jacking and carrying an ancient Winchester rifle. So, Mr. Millen struck up Highland Laddie.
Lovett approved it with a thumbs up and asked for the road to the Isles. Mr. Millen inquired half jokingly whether he should walk up and down in the traditional way of pipers. "Oh, yes, that would be lovely." What a fantastic piece of dialogue to show us the relationship that he had with this fairly famous British war personality, Lord Lovett. So instead of being like, and he knew Lord Lovett when he was in the service, we've shown you what their relationship looks like. We don't have to say that he knew him. We're giving an exchange of what it looked like when they were together on that morning. So this is painting a great picture. It's telling you exactly what he did. I mean, it's showing you exactly what he did. It's not having to give you sort of like a list of accomplishments. They're teaching you what kind of guy Bill Millen was. All right. I'm going to move on to the next bit. Boop. 3 times, therefore, he walked up and down at the edge of the sea. He remembered the sand shaking under his feet from mortar fire and the dead bodies rolling in the surf against his leg. For the rest of the day, whenever required, he played. He piped the advancing troops along the raised road by the King Canal, seeing the flashes from the rifle of a sniper about 100 yards ahead. He took them across 2 bridges, one later renamed the Pegasus Bridge, ringing and banging as shrapnel hit the metal sides. All the way, he learned, German snipers had had him in their sights, but out of pity for this madman, had not fired. So you're building up these images of the ballerina skirt, the eccentric lord in his like monogrammed shirt wearing, like bringing antique weapons to war. So you're getting this kind of funny, amusing imagery, and now you're starting to get some of that ugliness of war. The dead bodies in the surf. I mean, we got a hint of it with the vomit in the water from having to be out there on the choppy seas all night. But we're also getting sort of these hopeful undertones that German snipers had even had enough, I don't know, heart, soul to not shoot that crazy dude who's just playing show tunes while everyone else is in war. So it brings us this kind of very human moment, not just from Bill Millen, but from everyone around him, including the enemy. All right, whoops, there we go. The last tune he had piped on D-Day was The Nut Brown Maiden, played for a small red-haired girl, French girl, who, with her folks cowering behind her, had asked him for music as he passed their farm. He gave the pipes later to the museum at the Pegasus Bridge, which he often revisited and sometimes piped across during his long, quiet post-war career as a mental nurse in Dawlish at Devon. On one such visit, in a full Highland rig, which is with his pipes in his arms, he was approached by a smartly dressed woman of a certain age with faded red hair who planted a joyous kiss of remembrance on his cheek. I held it together. All right, look at that moment where instead of saying like, yes, he was a great man and he touched many lives during his long post-war career, you don't tell us, you show us. You've got this moment that you bring back from the day that we're talking about, and you're building all this imagery and you're building all this detail, and then you sort of pinpoint it again at the end to instead say, like, he did really great things and he saved lots of people. You can show us that someone cared. Show, not tell. I guess that's what I'm trying to get across, and that's something that is really easy for a teacher to say, and I bet your high school English teachers said it. I'm sure I accidentally said it a couple times when I'm like, explicate. But what does that mean? Start looking around you. Start looking at great writing. Start looking at good writing. Start noticing how bad writing just tells you stuff instead of showing you stuff. I'm not going to go on a huge tangent right now about how movies have gotten bad in the last, 10 years. But they're really good at just putting a character in there that's like the explication machine where they just tell you stuff. where you're like, oh, this is why we're doing that, and oh, that's the background on that, and oh, they had a real close relationship you didn't even know. Having to have this like explicating like story vomiter character in a movie is like a red flag that we are not showing, we're telling. There's a way to build it into the plot with some small exchanges to develop that information for your reader without having to just flat tell them. Sherlock Holmes, I think this is the reason why like that kind of bad writing is part of the good writing too. I think the Sherlock novels are great, but you've got Dr. Watson, because Sherlock just already understands everything already. So you've got to have the like derpy sidekick who's like, by Jove, Sherlock, tell me how you figured that out. And then he explains it to Sherlock and thus explains it to the audience. And that's like an okay plot device sometimes. But I think a lot of writing has become wildly over-dependent on that. And you can see here, Porter Shreve, this is an obituary of a man who lived to be in his 80s. And so we tell a story about one day in his life when he was, 21, 22? I forgot the last slide. And we paint a picture of who he was and what he did. And then we wrapped up in that like last 15% here that he led a long, calm, quiet life, but he impacted so many people, even if it was only the impact of that one day. And you can kind of explicate that I'm sure that he was a heck of a guy and that there were a lot more people that he touched in a lot more stories. Maybe not as crazy as this, but this is the man that you've taught us what a sort of rich character he is without telling us. We don't have to believe you. We've decided for ourselves. So Porter Shreve, this obituary, chef's kiss. I mean, like, don't go out and I guess like read obituaries for fun. I guess that's morbid, but I mean, if you're going to read obituaries, like read the ones in The Economist, because those are the ones about famous people and they are beautifully written. They're probably not by Porter Shreve anymore. He's quite old himself. I think he's retired, but I think this gets to my point of read promiscuously. Don't just read stuff you like. Don't just read genres that you're familiar with. Don't just read stuff that you already know. Read everything. I read The Economist. Do you think I give a crap about political science or international relations? Not really. But it's good writing. And it was good sort of, I would say, insight into political situations at the time. Whether or not I agreed with them was my own critique of the situation, because even good writing is biased. But it keeps you on your toes, and you get great examples of how people win arguments, even if you don't agree with their content. Read everything you can. Read biographies, read newspapers, read editorials, read trashy love novels, read histories, read articles from all kinds of magazines. I guess air travel is somewhat different now than it used to be, but there used to be like free magazines and like, I don't know, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and you just pick them up in the middle of the runway. Like, read one. It's not your thing? Great. I know that I've expressed what kind of a nerd I am on many occasions, but I never read fiction, except like literature with a capital L, in my entire life until, I don't know, I was maybe 25, 27. I was stuck in an airport in Denver in a terrible blizzard, and we were trapped there for 2 days. So I'm living in an airport terminal, and I'm bored. So I went by the bookstore when it was open, and I just bought like the paperback in the front, and I read like a archaeology mystery novel, and it was fiction, and the
person who wrote The Archaeologist has clearly never met an archaeologist, and like the science was garbage in the background, but it didn't matter. It was an adventure. And I ate that thing up in a couple hours, and I went back and the newsstand was still open, and they had like, if you bring back a book to sell it back to them, it was like 30% off a new book. And I did the switch like 4 times that night. Staying up just reading like crappy mystery paperbacks. And it was amazing. It was like candy. But I learned things. In my sort of nonfiction science zone, I was not enough familiar with dialogue. You know, like how do you write people having a conversation and keeping up pace? Because, you know, when we talk fast. When you read, when you add in the like, she said thoughtfully, like that can slow the pace down. So getting some examples of where you got bogged down with like, oh my God, this 30-second conversation has now taken 6 pages. Can we move on? That's bad pacing. And I started to recognize poorly written dialogue and really good dialogue. And now I kind of understand if I had to write a dialogue section, what I like, what I don't like, and how I would make it my own voice. So anything you read is helping you to be a better writer, to be a better critic, to be better at rhetoric, no matter what it is. Like you read comic books. I have friends who are academic scholars in comic books. I have a friend who's an academic scholar in horror movies. And I only watch them with her in the middle of the day while she gives rhetorical commentary on them, because horror movies just like give me nightmares for weeks and I can't handle that. But I can then look at them in a scholarly way and learn something from them, just like I would learn something from a history book that I would prefer to read. So whatever you do, read, and read as many different genres as you can. If you see like Mermaid Lifestyle magazine when you're at Barnes & Noble, like pick it up and read a couple articles. I don't know. So read often, read a bunch of different stuff, read promiscuously, dabble in a bunch of stuff, and write as often as you can in as many genres as you can. I know that a lot of times you only write when you have to communicate. But now start thinking about putting a line of poetry down or making a concise, like Hemingway short sentence statement on the back of a napkin every single time you go out to eat. If you go out to eat by yourself or you're in a fast food thing, like write something on a napkin and then like wad it up and throw it away. And if you keep doing that, you're going to keep words will come easier to you. And you will be less precious about, that was a good sentence. And then you wadded it up and threw it away. And the first couple times you're going to be like, no, I should put that on my fridge. No, that was really good. No, because the more often that you write really good stuff that you wad up and chuck in the trash every single time you go for fast food or whatever, you will now be a better reviser. You'll be a better editor of your own work because you won't be so precious about every sentence. If you wrote something and you're like, that is a good sentence, but it is very off topic from what we're doing, cut it. It's not going to feel like solid gold only comes out of you once in a blue moon. It's going to feel like I can write strong sentences all the time. So this one getting deleted, no big deal, no skin off my teeth, and it will make your writing better. Anytime you have to actually sit down and write something serious, if you've thrown away 50 really cool observations on napkins in the last month, the next time you sit down to write something for real, you've read 10 different magazines on stuff you didn't even know you liked. You've thrown away 50 really good statements on napkins every single time you've gone to a fast food place. I hope you don't eat out fast food 50 times in a month. But you've been a more voracious reader. You've been a more casual writer. And now you sit down to do something serious and real, and your skills are going to be better. Your revision skills are going to be better because it doesn't hurt so bad to cut something or rearrange something or get rid of something. So I hope that you just consume and produce text and communication with the world around you with more awareness after this course. And
you can keep doing that from now for the rest of your life, and you will continue to be better at whatever it is you choose to do. So I hope I have you in another course sometime in your university career. But if this is the last time I see you, then Godspeed with the tools that I have presented here. And I hope that your new skills of awareness in this world can give you just a more fulfilled idea of what the world is and what you can offer it. Thank you.